Hello, and welcome to Bedtime Stories with Mozart. This is a podcast designed to help young ones fall asleep. As a group of youth musicians, we are passionate about exposing others to classical music. Each episode, we will read a bedtime story, followed by a short excerpt of a calming selection of classical music. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today, I'll be reading Parent Strike. "We're going to stop feeding you," Mom said. "I understand," I replied. "Don't worry, Harry. These things don't last too long," said Dad. "We know you're a good boy," added Mom, "but lots of kids aren't, and the whole point of a strike is that the strikers stick together." Mom and Dad's eyes met. They nodded to one another. Dad looked around, beckoned me closer, and closed my hand around a $10 note. "Here," he said softly. "Just don't let on it was me that gave you that." Arriving at school that first morning, the atmosphere was more hostile than usual. News of the parent strike had obviously not gone down well. The principal stood at the gate, flanked by security guards. "Morning," he greeted each child robotically. The replies he received were not very kind. Our teacher attempted to explain the situation to our class about a general lack of gratitude in the younger generation and rampant levels of disrespect and hooliganism, but none of the kids were having it. "They're supposed to feed us. That's their job." "Yeah, it's not our fault they bored us." "Anyway, I don't care. Now I get to have whatever I want." By lunchtime, I was starving, but the canteen's shutters were pulled down and locked. There was a mom taping up a sign. "Excuse me, any chance of lunch?" I asked. She looked down, her crinkled nose at me. "Not from here, there's not. We're parents too, you know. Read the sign." I did. It read, "Canteen closed. No food till you learn some respect." I sighed, resigned myself to a grumbly tummy, and went behind the portables to read my book. I liked that spot because it was quiet and a long way from the handball courts where my worst enemy, Shannon, and her friends usually hung out. But today I was interrupted. They were there. I ducked behind the boulder I'd been sitting on. "What's that filth?" came Shannon's horrible voice. "What? It's a Mandarin sandwich," Shannon's henchperson Blake replied defensively. "Gross. What's that red stuff on it?" whined Kirby, henchperson number 2. "Tomato sauce. Ew." "What you've got then, Kirby?" Blake asked, diverting the attention. "Hot dog," she stated, voice faltering. "You're lucky. Come on then, show us." There was the sound of a lunchbox opening, then raucous cackling. "That's a banana on a piece of lettuce," Shannon howled. "Yeah, well, I didn't have any bread, or sausages." I knelt on a twig, and it snapped loudly. Their voices went quiet. I wished for them to disappear back to the handball courts. "Harriet," Shannon hissed. "She's been listening in." "It's Harry," I replied feebly, and no, I have not. Shannon's smirk broadened, her eyes narrowed. "I'm such a genius," she gloated, walking around behind me. "I've just come up with a brilliant way to survive this strike." She took hold of my arm and twisted behind my back. "We'll share Harriet's food." She wrenched on my arm and my shoulder burned. "I don't have any," I sputtered. "He's lying. Hand it over, bum breath." I considered explaining Dad's canteen money, but thought better of it. "I can't," I stuttered. I ate it already." Shannon pushed me forward onto my hands and knees. "Must have been good then," she said. "Seems like we got a master chef on our hands. Tell you what, you bring us lunch tomorrow, something gourmet. We'll give you this back." She held up a $10 note. My hand went to my pocket. It was empty. She nodded and laughed. They wandered away giggling as I brushed the dirt from my knees. My stomach was in a knot for the rest of the day. If I didn't give Shannon what she wanted, I wouldn't get Dad's money back, and if I told anyone, I'd expose Dad for breaking the terms of the strike. I was stuck. As soon as I got home, I emptied my money box and rode to the supermarket. It was a wild scene when I arrived. Everything, besides the fruit, vegetables, and health food aside, had been roped off. A sizable security squad had been employed to prevent kids from accessing the other sections. A rowdy mob mouthed off at the guards and taunted any adults entering the forbidden zones. In fresh produce, the scene was even more chaotic. Desperation had whipped up a panic-buying frenzy. Kids were grabbing whatever they could, snatching food from others' hands, and fending predators off their trolleys. "What's this?" one kid asked, holding up a zucchini. I don't know, his sister responded, shoving it in her basket, but we gotta eat. At home, I laid what I managed to get on the kitchen bench. It was a strange hodgepodge of ingredients, but they would do. I set to work. I pushed my culinary skills further than ever before, but the dish was missing something. I searched for a morsel, but the pantry was locked and the fridge was alarmed as per strike regulations. Then it came to me. There was more food in the house. From the cupboard beneath the sink, I pulled out a can of Meowie's cat food, ocean banquet and jelly. I prized off the lid. The fishy pulp glistened. Its pungent aroma nuzzled my gag reflex. As she's inclined to, my cat Smokey appeared. She mewed and wound round my legs. Hey Smokey, want a taste? I proffered the open can long enough for a few good licks and a couple of gobfuls. I mixed the cat's saliva in with a fork and then dumped the can's contents into the dish. My creation was completed. Okay, disaster chef, show us what you got, and it better be good, Shannon demanded at lunchtime the following day. I sat with my lunchbox on my lap. They crowded round like 3 starving vultures. I peeled off the lid, revealing my nutritious masterpiece. What even is that? Blake squealed. Smoked tuna and quinoa salad with chickpeas, currants, and cashews. Kirby grabbed her stomach and made retching sounds. Is this a joke? Shannon asked. No, I was up all night making this. It's gourmet. It's what you asked for. She eyed the lunchbox, and me, suspiciously. It's delicious. I promise, I enthused. Prove it then, she said. What do you mean? You go first. Take a bite. I looked at the salad, then back at Shannon. I can't, I murmured. Why not? I'm allergic to cashews. Shannon frowned. She took Dad's $10 note from her pocket and held it up. If this stuff turns out to be anything less than the scrimmiest thing ever tasted, your $10 won't be the only thing you lose. A hand snatched the note from Shannon's fingers. She spun around to come face to face with a wall of adults, the principal and 2 mountainous bodyguards. Thank you, young lady. I'll take that, the principal said. He pointed at my lunchbox. And that too. I stood and handed it over. Now, the 4 of you, to my office, pronto. The next hour was spent waiting silently in the corridor, under guard. One by one, my enemies were taken in for interrogation and emerged later, blearily eyed and shaken. Shannon was in there the longest. When she came out, she was saltier than the Dead Sea. If the bodyguard had not dragged her away, her seething stare would have bored a hole through my forehead. The principal's office was dim, reeked of coffee breath, and was taken up mostly by his leather-topped desk, on which lay Dad's $10. Is this yours? He asked, indicating the note with an eye flick. I shook my head. Be honest now. He stood motionless, eyes locked on mine in a dangerous game of chicken. His penetrating gaze put Shannon's deathly stare to shame. He was the heavyweight champion of stairs, and I wasn't even a puny featherweight. I broke. I nodded meekly. Who gave you this? Please, sir, it was my dad, but he held up a hand. As I expected. He waggled a finger and tutted. It was a grave misjudgment on your father's part, flaunting the parental strike rules by aiding a minor. He sighed dramatically. But what makes matters worse is that we seem to have a case of like father, like son. Your little friends told me everything. But sir, His hand went up again. He walked slowly round the desk to the door, peered down the corridor in both directions, then closed it with a soft click. He moved back behind the desk, and slid Dad's money towards me. Take it, he whispered. I looked at his stony face. Was this some sort of test? You heard me. I took the note and shoved it in my pocket. The principal opened a drawer and took out my lunchbox. He placed it on the desk where the note had been. I looked inside. The salad was gone. That, he said, was possibly the most delicious culinary delight I have ever had the pleasure of tasting. The end. Thanks for listening. Be sure to remember to follow so you never miss an episode. Now, you'll be hearing the Barber Violin Concerto performed by Juling Wang. Good night.